Hello and welcome to Real-ationship Talk, the podcast hosted by yours truly, Teresha Young, relationship master coach, where we have open, non-judgmental, heart-to-heart conversations about love, self-love, self-care, dating, and relationships. And for this week's episode, I am being joined by the marvelous Jennifer Cairns. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Teresha. It's lovely to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I've been looking so much forward to this conversation. So I'm just going to let the audience know a bit more about you before we crack on into our conversation.
Yes,
So
thank you.
for those who don't know who Jennifer is the founder of Rebel World Limited and the Lady Rebel Club movement, where they empower, encourage, advocate for, connect, and elevate women and all marginalised gender entrepreneurs who are neurodiverse or have disabilities. Through Rebel World, she runs the Rebel Leader Institute, Rebel World Media, and Rebel Heart Publishing, which publishes the much-acclaimed book series Rebel with a Cause. Being neurodivergent and having several disabilities, including fibromyalgia, GAD, CPTSD, and rare blood cancer, Jennifer knows how high the hurdles can be for humans like her. Her heart, enthusiasm, passion, and grit show in everything she does. She's an international best-selling author, brand and business mentor, neurodiversity and disability changemaker, and self-empowerment speaker. Jennifer lives in
A bit
Northern
of a
Ireland.
mouthful there, sorry.
It is a mouthful, but I absolutely love saying it. Off the tongue. And last but not least, she lives in Northern Ireland with her husband, two boys, and their dog. She believes with her whole heart we all have value to give, and that being different doesn't mean less.
Yes.
Oh, what a wonderful introduction, Jennifer.
Oh, well, thank you.
I'd like to explore much more about your journey. So I would absolutely love if you could share with us some of the key highlights of your life journey and career that led you to doing all of those wonderful things.
Well, I suppose to try and keep it brief, because I love to talk now. So,
Yeah.
I suppose for me it was throughout my whole life. I always just felt different. I never, even as a child, I never felt like I belonged. You could also see, and it was just, I guess, kind of different things as far as I struggled even perhaps with my own identity to the point to where, because I was masking at the time, I didn't realize it was neurodivergent, of course, but because of the masking, which a lot of us do, which helps us kind of blend in around us. And it's subconscious, it's something that we don't choose to do. But I would have taken on a lot of the accents, even to some degrees, like the music, the things that I liked, the dress style, everything according to what men I was dating at the time. Like you could see a whole snapshot of like all the different looks.
Yeah.
or different friends, sort of close friend groups that I would have had. And kind of throughout that journey, and then as I went through and into adulthood, a lot of that had an impact on my physical health and mental health as I grew up, and sort of late teens, early 20s. I had a lot of struggle even as a kid with anxiety disorders and things, even though they weren't diagnosed at the time. And that just kind of carried on. I met my husband over in America. I'm from America and he's from Northern Ireland. So moved over here, got married, and just kind of went from there. We started to, we each kind of had our own jobs, but we ended up going into business together because I had always had a business in the States around a magazine and did different things over there. And in the course of, I think had our consultancy for about 15 years, where we worked on brand development and launch and things like that for startups. He had a stroke right when we were beginning to bring things online, completely out of the blue. He was very, fit and healthy, so it was very unexpected, of course. And he was very young, his early 40s when it happened. So it was, just like I said, very unexpected. But that, of course, had a ripple effect on the business, on our family life, of course. He was in hospital for like a month and spent probably like 6 months then going down to the brain injury clinic and for outpatient OT and things of that nature. So it's been a very long journey for him. About, I would say, 2 months roughly after he had his stroke, I got my blood cancer diagnosis. My health had continued to go downhill. I knew I had fibromyalgia a few years before that, and a couple of autoimmune disorders, and of course the anxiety disorders and things of that nature. And then 2 months after that, COVID hit. So it was kind of like a 5 to 6 month span of just chaos. It's like the best way I can kind of explain it. And my son had a lot of struggles with mental health during that time as well. So it was very, it was a very difficult time, to be honest. But kind of through that, and it's ironic because now, and it's funny how hindsight, gives you that vision, isn't it?
It does.
And I think for me, in the midst of all that chaos, I had come up with the idea for Lady Rebel Club. I didn't know what it was going to be exactly, but I could very clearly see that, especially in the online space, because we weren't online and we didn't do a lot of marketing with the consultancy. I never didn't firsthand really use Facebook or Instagram or, LinkedIn, even very much for ourselves, nothing like that. So when I was in that space and after going through all of this, it was like the more chaotic my life was, the clearer I could see that there were so many other, especially women out there like myself, who hid, they hid their disabilities, they hid their neurodiversity. And I did the same thing in the consultancy. It was like, oh no, I don't want people to know. What are my clients going to say? They're going to think I'm not as capable, all of this kind of shame that we carry around, that society, unfortunately, places upon our shoulders. And I just knew that I had to do something, and I wasn't sure what it was going to be. And from that point, I really spent the next kind of 2 years kind of just dabbling around, trying to figure out how that was going to kind of form and shape. And I spent a lot of time kind of on personal development and peak performance to figure out how I could best actually work, within the business. And once I stopped kind of trying to hide and contain all of these things going on with me, I was really better able to strongly assess what are my true genuine strengths and my true genuine weaknesses, which is fine because we all have them, right? You don't have to have a disability to have weaknesses. And once we're really fully aware of those, we can build a business around ourselves that just works better. And and I went from doing maybe 10-hour days with the laptop stuck to my head to maybe working 5-hour days or something of that nature. So it was a dramatic change for me in that regard as well. I established Rebel World then officially, I think it was March of this year. And again, I knew I wanted to do something. I wasn't sure exactly what. I became an author the year previous, in a anthology series that I was part of called Becoming an Unstoppable Woman. So that kind of introduced me to the book scene, if you will, which was brilliant. And through that experience and what I could see going on, I could see that not only did we need to advocate for ourselves, and again, women, mainly women like myself, needed, I guess I just needed that kind of internal shift as well, because the words that we say and how we speak to ourselves matter so much. And when we're continually trying to, again, to force ourselves to hide, it just doesn't work. So kind of changing all of that so we can better self-empower ourselves, so that we can be, have the best life that we want, so that we can create the best business and work the best way, within the business. And most importantly, be happy, because a lot of us are so miserable. So we're trying to contain all of this in, as well as, do all of the things, that everybody else is doing. So for me, that's been, the catalyst. And then this year, I've just been really, building on Rebel World. We've decided to add in a full media side. So we have a magazine, a podcast, the YouTube's getting ready to go up. And then towards the end of the year, it'll be ready then for January 2023, our cable show, and Dominable launches. And we have then our book side. So we added our own publishing side, and we're working with a fabulous lady called Charlotte Howard. Yay, Charlotte. So she's my girl in the publishing side. So we've kind of partnered together to create Rebel Heart Publishing, and are rolling that out for our community. We have a couple of clients on already. In fact, our first children's book that we published just launched, which is fantastic. It's called Adeline Plays Many Ways, and it's written by a lovely lady called Erica Joy Sneath, who has chronic pain that she suffers with from issues she's had with her ankle and all these surgeries and everything else. I mean, she's had a real struggle with it. But to help her, she could see her nieces and nephews and things just to kind of help them to understand about chronic pain, you know, a
Yeah.
bit better. And then it doesn't completely change the person you are, but you just might have to change certain aspects. So just to kind of help kids build that empathy and awareness. So it's it's obviously a wonderful book. So that's kind of me in a very long nutshell.
Oh gosh, thank you so much for that share, because so many aspects resonated with me when you're talking.
Mm,
Because myself, I'm the mother of a 5-year-old, wonderful, amazing, content
yes.
daughter who could be categorized as being neurodiverse herself,
Mm-hmm.
with two diagnoses of global developmental delay, stroke
Mm,
impairment, and also an underlying medical condition called MED13L syndrome. So when you're
mm,
talking to me, it really resonates in terms of your movement. It really touches my heart deeply. So I wanted to bounce back to the moment you got a diagnosis as
mm-hmm.
well, because I suppose you were living life and not
Yeah.
really been able to have clarity on why you were doing the things you were doing,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the way that you were thinking. Did a diagnosis help you to make sense of what you were experiencing?
With the cancer or with the
Let's
on the neurodivergent side?
yeah,
Yeah.
the that side.
It did for sure. And it was actually, ironically, I was in therapy because of my GAD had gotten so bad that I was really struggling to even leave the house. And I couldn't go anywhere. There was like 2 or 3 places that I could go, you know, with any kind of comfort at all. Escorted by my husband. He's like my partner in crime. I call him because he goes everywhere.
Yeah.
I love him. And yeah, it was just, I mean, it had just gotten to a point where it was like this is utterly ridiculous. So started therapy. And it was kind of through that course that, yeah, my therapist was like, yeah. Has anyone told you you're autistic? It was like, what?
Hmm.
And it was funny because I had kind of, because my youngest is, autistic. Although we do believe he also has, now he has undiagnosed OCD, possibly
Ah.
ADHD, but he's definitely OCD as well. And my eldest is neurodivergent and undiagnosed at this stage, neurodivergent as well.
Hmm.
Um, and it was funny because through learning a lot through him, because it was myself who had pushed for his diagnosis, because it was clear as day after we
Hmm.
realized it wasn't a hearing. We thought he had a hearing impairment.
Yeah.
When he was very young, he was like 2, and he got his diagnosis when he was 4. And it was
Ah.
kind of through that I started to go, oh, this kind of sounds familiar. But because women or
Hmm.
girls and boys and men present so differently, I was like, no, that doesn't fit. No, that doesn't fit. So
Yeah.
everything was kind of just chalked up to either my fibromyalgia, if it was a medical thing, and it's one of those labels that once you get that, that diagnosis of that disability, the health service likes to put everything underneath it, or everything was kind of put under my anxiety disorder. So there was
Hmm.
never really any dive in to figure out what else was going on.
Yeah.
So it was only kind of through that then I was going, yeah, stuff makes sense. And it was funny because even with my husband, things made sense to him, and even things that would have caused arguments, in
Yeah.
our relationship. For instance, I never minded when he went out. I never minded. I was like, yeah, go out with your friends, have beer,
Yeah.
do whatever, right? But then on the day, and it was like clockwork, on the day, a couple of hours before he would go
Yeah.
out, I would just sort of have this like surge of anxiety, and I would get really frantic, like manically start cleaning the house, random cupboards, were like random things. And I would get a bit prickly. It was
Yeah.
like, why is it every time you're happy for me to go? But then, so that was kind of always a bit of like, we just kind of dealt with it because he knew it was going to come.
Yeah.
And then once he got home, it was fine. There was no problem. But it was just that period leading up to that. And through being able to look at it through the eyes of being autistic, I was able to go, right,
Ah.
there is there's obviously other factors impacting that, but that was just, and a lot of my manicness, that's how I deal with stress.
Okay.
I do internalize a lot. So a
Mm.
lot of it you don't see. But some of the external stuff comes out when I excessively clean. I'll just randomly start like emptying cupboards and cleaning them,
Yeah.
or organizing things, and I'll
Mm.
dump out the wardrobes, and like every time before lunch I'll have to empty everything out in the office or reorganize it. It's
Okay.
great. It's yeah,
Okay.
it's fun.
Yeah.
But that's just how and I allow that now to happen because I go,
Yeah.
right, I try to make it, as fruitful as possible. I'm like I'm gonna have this, these feelings and everything come up. So how can I best deal with them? Now I don't have an official diagnosis yet of ADHD. I'm waiting on the waiting list, but I know I'm ADHD as well. So
Yeah.
for me, it's been fantastic as well, knowing both of those pieces of me exist, because of even on the autistic side, and I've only known for maybe, it hasn't been that long. It's been maybe 4 or 5 years. But there was a lot of things that still didn't fit for me, because
Yeah.
when you looked at, there was a lot of things that did, but there was a lot of things that didn't, as far as like some of my behavior, where I would take really risky things. Like I would have hitchhiked, like, oh,
Yeah.
let's go hitchhike to Florida, all the way from Ohio.
Yeah.
And I mean, just stuff that you just know. My autistic side, that once I was in the midst of that, was going, what have you done?
Yeah.
Where are we going? What's happening?
Yeah.
But I just would have these kind of other aspects that I just couldn't gel, but once I started to investigate that and realize and go, right, okay, so this part of my brain is working this way and this part of my brain is working that way. And it is almost like there's two parts. And as long as I give room in my life and in my business for both of those parts to show up, I can kind of direct the energies, not all of the time, but most of the time, in the best ways. So I always laugh, because I said the background, like
Mm.
that's genuine, and that's
Yeah.
100% my autistic side. Like everything has its place, it needs to be neat and
It's
ordered.
very organized.
Yes. And then there's the desk,
Yeah.
which has the piles of papers and posties, and and that's
Yeah.
my ADHD side. And I said, you know what, that's okay, because they both have their space. And that's part of my own self-empowerment, because I understand myself well enough and love
Yeah.
myself well enough that I can go, hey, do you know what, it's okay that I have all of these different sides to me. How can I accommodate them and give
Yeah.
both of them space?
Oh, wow. I just love the way how you brought it into unison there. The
Mm,
full acceptance of the different parts of yourself that make the whole.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that's absolutely beautiful, the way that you described it, because that journey that you explained as well, in a period of 5 to 6 months,
mm,
everything happened at that time as
mhm.
well. And to be able to navigate that and still come out at the end of it with so many incredible initiatives and movements, I just think, just witnessing and celebrating you for doing all of that.
Oh, well, thank you.
What I want to also delve a bit more into was when you were speaking about women not necessarily speaking up. Generally, we
Mhm.
may not do that in our business, entrepreneurship, we may not. And equally, on the neurodiverse side of it as well, you may even feel some more limitations to
Yeah.
be able to. Have you got any key, I guess, limitations when you're working with women, that some of the key things that they say, oh, I can't do that because?
I think the biggest thing that's threads through all of us is that we don't want people to know. Oh, I don't want, no, I can't, I don't want people to know. I don't want to be public about it. I don't want to tell people about it. I don't want my clients to know, because there really is that stigma and that shame attached.
Mm.
And that is definitely the biggest thread. These limited beliefs that we've just grown up in society hearing, about, and live with. And the way, it's funny, because the way I always like to describe it, is sometimes I use a lot of food analogies.
I love
It's
food.
like,
Go ahead.
yes. So cake. So it's like, a layer cake, so because we're women, we have an extra layer that we kind of have to get over, right? To
Yeah.
stack it up. And if we're neurodivergent, that's another layer. And then if you have other, disabilities, that's another layer. And it's funny because, and we do have, a lot of us, and myself included, you have to have a sense of humor about things,
Yeah.
I believe. And one of my good friends, Ella Sean, in our community, we laugh because she's like, well, I'm like the top of the cake because I'm a single Black mom with ADHD. I'm like, yes, you are.
Oh,
You're
it's
the
just
top layer.
layered on top.
But see, when we're genuine about it, and we kind of own it rather than trying to hide it and run from it, it allows us to have that sense of humor. It allows us to embrace ourselves, because we all have a bit of a quirky side.
Yeah.
You don't have to be, again, neurodivergent to have that. We all have our hurdles. We all have our strengths. And that's the biggest thing that I would say. And that's what a big part of the movement is with Lady Rebel Club, is to try to let other, again, especially women, realize that, hey, it's okay to say, I have whatever your disability is, chronic pain, illness, cancer, hearing impairment, whatever. It could be a physical impairment, or if you're neurodivergent, it's okay. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to acknowledge the hurdles that you have, because and another thing that I would say to them is, how can you jump that hurdle if you don't acknowledge that it exists? This is
Mm.
why over and over, and this is what I saw so prevalent, and it just hit me like a ton of rocks during that, that 5-month period. And all of these, especially on Facebook and all of these Facebook groups, and I was seeing all of the women doing the same thing, just running into that hurdle over and over and over. And I was like, acknowledge it, and then you can jump it. And until you acknowledge it, and you're just going to keep running into it, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, there's that saying, what you resist persists, and it
Yes.
just will stay there and fester till it becomes a deep wound.
Yeah.
Because what you're talking about in terms of some of the shame of talking publicly about a disability or being neurodiverse, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, so where does that shame stem from? And would you say that a lot of it has stemmed from childhood and us growing up?
Oh, yes. A
Yeah.
lot, a lot. And that's why I admire, so much with you and the work that you're doing with your daughter, and your relationship with her, because there isn't that stigma, that you're applying. You're letting her be herself while supporting her, as well as advocating for her, because she's too young at this stage to advocate for
Yeah.
herself. And, I very much have the same approach with my son,
Mm.
who's autistic, as I had mentioned, and, my youngest. And he's needed me to advocate for him for school, to get the costume
Mm.
support, all these kinds of things. But also, and I think he was about, well, he's 12 now. I think he was probably about 10 when we told him that he was autistic, 10 and a half maybe, and started to explain, what that means. But he knew, he's very, very self-aware. And he
Mm.
knew from early on, he was like, my brain's not like everybody else's. Why is my brain not like everybody else's? And we could see him really struggling with that. So now we've turned it into conversations around like, that yes, he might have different ways he needs to do things to make it easier for him or better for him, to engage in certain things. But at the same time, he has so many strengths, and it's trying to teach him to, how he can empower those strengths and use them, and not being very aware that, just because he is autistic doesn't mean that, he's any less than anybody else. And I know you advocate for that with your daughter as well, and that's beautiful.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you do the same, because I like to call it my daughter's superpowers in
Yeah.
terms of, how she approaches it and how she approaches life, and to
Mm-hmm.
focus on the capability.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned before about, yes, everybody has strengths and
Yeah.
weaknesses. And it's also about looking into the strengths, because I suppose a lot of the shame can stem from people focusing very much on the weaknesses of having a difference. And
Yeah, definitely.
would you say
Yeah.
the same?
Oh, yeah, for sure. But I think the external world always focuses on that, and it's our human nature to want to label and organize people.
Mm.
That's what, and we do it in so many different ways. We do it subconsciously as soon as we meet somebody. So I think in some ways, removing all of those subconscious biases isn't overly, it's extremely ambitious and probably not overly realistic.
Yeah.
From my point of view, I think it's more acknowledging those subconscious biases when they creep up and going, hey, wait a
Yeah.
minute, this is crap.
Yeah.
This is not
Yeah.
the way that we should be thinking. How can we reframe this? And then hopefully maybe that'll, eventually lead to those, subconscious biases, maybe not being so prevalent, but they are there. And I think acting like they're not is just ridiculous, really. So it is trying to, be aware of them, acknowledging, like I said, acknowledging the weaknesses, acknowledging those hurdles, not focusing on them completely, but we have to say, hey, they're here. Let's, how are we going to get over it? How are we going to cope with it? How are we going to deal with it? And I think for a lot of us who are neurodivergent or have a disability, we're either naturally born with a lot of grit, and determination, or we earn it because the world isn't made for us, a lot of us, and we have to work often 10 times harder, than a lot of people, to do the things that maybe that they do, or the things that we want to do. And, I think that makes us not necessarily superheroes, but, it definitely means, I think we just do have a lot of strength and determination. We just have to free ourselves, and allow us to kind of roll with it.
Yeah. And we're talking about some of the hurdles that yourself and other women you encounter may experience. Whilst you have been creating this wonderful movement, have you experienced any hurdles from biases or
Oh, yes.
what
Yeah. Well,
type
I've
of?
been discriminated against, in my opinion, for legal reasons, against, the biggest funding body here. They found out that I was very open and said I was neurodivergent, had a disability. And I battled with them for a year for them even to review my business information or business plan, which
Wow.
goes against their guidelines. And this was even the equality, team was even involved. It
Wow.
was horrendous. Like, it was, and I saw some of the internal emails between them saying that I must have issues with my own disability, and that my business was never going to get funded anyway. And they hadn't even seen anything, like nothing.
Oh,
I mean, it was just,
that's appalling.
it was appalling, especially because the equality team was involved. And I was like, if this is the thinking, of the equality team, we've no chance. And I think we are seeing some change. I think especially like in corporate, we are seeing some changes, but there is so much. I was bullied by a coach when I first kind of came online. And in fact, that's how I met Janine. I was bullied by this coach who was just absolutely awful, was telling me, don't wear, the scarves or the boppers, don't wear this, don't do that. And was just kind of telling me basically everything about myself was kind
Yeah.
of wrong. And it put me in a place where I was doing my lives like this, and I was just petrified, to even let any of my personality or any of myself really kind of show through. And yeah, so that, that in and of itself. And I think whether it's in childhood as we grow up and we have people constantly saying to us, you know, don't act this way, or why are you, acting this way, behave this way, don't do that because other kids don't do that, behave, that was very much a tomboy, labeled a tomboy, and didn't fall in line with a lot of the other girls. I wanted to go out and climb trees and I've always wanted to be outside, that was always my thing as a kid. And yeah, it was just I just wasn't, your typical, sort of little girl who wanted to wear the dresses and do all of the things. I just wanted to go get mucky and play with dump trucks, and
Yeah.
do, do all that kind of stuff. And,
Yeah.
always wore my Docs and my boots growing up. And, it was funny because it was, I remember my best friend one time, I had stayed over at her house. My boots were outside her bedroom door, and her dad thought that there was a fella in her. And he comes,
Really?
who's in this? It's like, oh, it's just, oh, those are her boots. Yes, okay.
Her boots, okay.
Yes, yes, yes. So quite, yeah, it was quite funny. But yeah, so I think we do carry that. We definitely carry that, that seed of shame and stigma, as we grow and as we try to fit in. And again, I think especially for women, because we mask so well, but that masking just takes its toll. And this is why so many of us, as adults, who, especially those of us who are late diagnosed, struggle so much with like autoimmune disorders, gastric disorders, fibromyalgia. They think a lot of the cause of fibromyalgia is long-term stress on the brain. Some of the studies are saying. So you will see a lot of people who have, anxiety conditions, or again, any kind of neurodiversity, often have, some kind of fibromyalgia, or like I said, gastric and anxiety disorders,
Yeah.
is very common with a lot of us as well.
Mm. And what you're speaking about there as well, which I'm just thinking about even more, is the education piece
Mm.
for at a young age as well, and how it can start from being a child and how it can move into adulthood. And there's something that was coming to me. So let's say in a work environment, the employees are often given equality training. For
Mm-hmm.
example, you go on once a year, maybe do your annual equality training and so
Yes.
forth. At school and education, I can see, for example, in my daughter's school, they are doing their best to educate all
Mm.
children about embracing differences, disabilities, and having that inclusiveness and
Mm-hmm.
um, equity as well. I can see that. I almost feel like there's a second part though for maybe the parents or carers of
Yes.
children.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we as parents as well could be sent on some sort of course or some sort of thing to educate
Mm.
us, because whilst our children might be not having any biases, we as adults could be carrying unconscious bias as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So the book that you spoke about in terms of the lady who had a chronic pain, and she's
Mm-hmm.
written a book now to help with her, her nieces and her nephews to
Yes.
perhaps understand more. I think more of those books as a standard in
Yeah.
schools, that parents read it as well to their children,
Yes.
would be a massive game changer as
Oh,
well.
definitely.
It would
Definitely.
just,
Yeah. It's having those different voices, and again, it's something that I always talk about. And I say, when you go to build your business, make sure that you have, a wide variety of people with all kinds of different, thinking and talents and skills and, ideas, but also experiences. And I think if we really seek to, not just go, here's the skill that I need and here's the typical person, that I want to hire, but we surround ourselves with people with all different kinds of experiences. Not only can our business flourish, but we as humans, are going to naturally flourish. And I think it's only seen, people can tell us, don't be biased about this. But I think we have to actually be around people and allow ourselves to be around all different kinds of people to really see them as human. I know that sounds maybe over the top, but I think it's very true, and to really understand as much as we can, right? And to grow that empathy. And it's just like I say, and not that I'm comparing, in any sort of way, but there, there's so many people in our community who are LGBTQ plus, I'm not. But through them, I'm able to better empathize, with some of the situations that maybe they have to deal with, and the shame and the stigma and, all of those barriers. So that's just what I think it is. And I think you're very right. Having something for parents, there should be something for everybody, that you just go on to, or, and you just meet other people. And I know they used to do a lot of, probably not quite so much over here, but I know like in America, they would have had a lot of like PTA groups and things like this. Now, sometimes they're limited, and there's only certain kinds of people that are on them. But if they, like you said, through school, they could do some kind of group thing where they could bring people together a bit more, or even doing like matching, where they match different kinds of parents together, just to have different experiences. I think there's so much of that. I think also, though, unfortunately, you would have a lot of resistance to something like that as well.
It is a change, and the change can feel very difficult for most people as well, to be able to embrace change. But it's the way in which the change is integrated and managed, which is so important. And even in those situations, for example, you may have a mummy who is an entrepreneurial woman or businesswoman who doesn't actually realize that they could have some form of neurodiversity.
A lot of us don't realize it, because we're especially, again, with women, because we were missed. And it's only usually through, ironically, our children, through their diagnosis, or through maybe being, just seeing somebody else, or seeing, especially now that there's a lot of like influencer stuff, content creators and things like that talk about, especially like ADHD, and which is kind of the new big one, it was dyslexia, now it's ADHD. So you do hear a lot about that, and you see more, women coming out and talking about it, because they're going, oh, wait, hold on, this does explain a lot of stuff that's kind of going on with me. So it is through that, that awareness. But for a lot of us, it is, it isn't something we find out very late in life. And sometimes it's a shock and sometimes it's not.
Yeah. I would like to, also explore, because you spoke about how sometimes stress can cause certain medical conditions as well. So for you personally, how are you able to manage your mind, your body, your spirit, if that takes place, to be able to navigate the conditions that you have?
I don't think it isn't always easy, and every day isn't perfect, and if I was to sit here and go, oh yes, I'm, fabulous every day, it'd be a complete lie. I think for me, a lot of it is, as cheesy as it sounds, is having gratitude in whatever shape or form. Like I always tell my kids, and anybody really, who will listen, that there's always something, whatever situation we're in. So say, for instance, when I got my cancer diagnosis, of course I wasn't thrilled about it. I wasn't happy about it. But I was happy that it was me and not one of my kids. And for me, that was the biggest, blessing that I had in that situation. I was like, well, look, this is great because it's not them. Okay. So I would have taken it on the chin all day long. So I think that it's always, in whatever situation we're in, it's looking at, right, how could it be worse? During COVID, and the kids are going, oh, but I want to do this. I'm like, listen, I don't want to hear it. You've got a front garden. Imagine living in a flat and having to share a room with your brother or 3 siblings and not having, space to get outside. Enjoy the front garden and, be happy about it. But once you kind of reframe things and you can say, look at how it could be, you do instantly get that gratitude for whatever situation you have. But I think on the flip side, it's always having that hope as well. So again, going through my cancer treatments, it's like, right, well, hopefully, I'll be around for another couple of years or 20 years, or, hopefully the treatment works. And you can reframe that, to whatever situation you're in. So I think having that hope kind of always keeps to some degree, our spirit up. And I think having that sense of gratitude just always makes us realize, well, look, yeah, it can always, and it doesn't matter what situation you're in, it can always be worse. So I think and that's not always easy, especially when if you are sitting there and, I know some women who, are at stage 4 right now and, and are really struggling. And I'm not saying that that's by at all that a situation in and of itself that they should be grateful for. But I'm sure that there's something in there, and whether it's maybe they've had they've been able to have a great experience with their family, before, certain things happen, or they were able to get things in order, or, they were able to make awesome memories with their kids. But, whatever it might be. And you can flip that on the neurodivergent side as well. Some people see it as a negative when you get your diagnosis. And again, like we talked about, look at all of the, all of the things that go with it. But it's having that sense of gratitude. Well, look at all the strength, and whether God, universe, whatever it is, you sort of believe in. I think for me personally, I was blessed with being neurodivergent. Unfortunately, the flip side of that was that it wasn't diagnosed early, but I think it has given me this natural, I just have more grit than anyone I've ever met. And I think that's allowed me to withstand, if you will, and kind of not necessarily always overcome, but, withstand and keep on going with a lot of the things that have happened in life.
Oh, I love that practice. Gratitude can be such an antidote to not feeling so good,
Yeah.
to reframe. And it's something that I certainly practice on a daily basis, because even if we go back and we look at the memories, because we might have uncertainty about the future, but if we can hold gratitude about what we have achieved and also present for the now, there will always be something, even if it is, I've just had another day to breathe and to soak it in.
Yeah, exactly. Because even that in and of itself, like you're saying, there's so many people who don't have that, and who know that that's not coming up. And, again, that's obviously a very difficult thing to deal with. It's, so it's like how I can explain it to people. I'm like, imagine a bus is coming at you and they're telling you, here's the day and the time that bus is going to hit you, and you have to stand there and watch it. So you can stand there and watch it, and, and I don't get me wrong, it's not like I haven't had moments where I've been like, oh, poor me, and, and that kind of stuff. But overall, I'm like, right, bring it on, because that bus, I can move, I can dodge, I'll climb over the thing,
Yeah.
I'll lay flat and it can run it. So I'm already going, right, how do I, and I think that's it, that's it as well. It's kind of just having that gratitude and I think that gives me the strength to go, right, well, what can I do here? Because I'm grateful for what I have. And whether it's going, I want more success in the business, I want, better things for my family. I want, to have a better impact in the world. I want things to change for people like me, having those kind of internal drivers as well that just keep me going too. So when things do get overwhelming, and they do, and funny enough, I just went through about a really bad spell when we had our book launch in October, and I knew, because I know myself well enough, at this stage, I said, I know for probably a few days, maybe even a week afterwards, I'm going to be, touch and go a little bit, just because of all of the stress and the good stress too, and the excitement and, all of this that had built up for it. And I pushed myself really hard the first sort of few days, leading up to launch, and for a couple of days after launch as well on top of that. And I made the mistake then of going to the fireworks here for Halloween, which we hadn't been to because of COVID in 3 years. And fireworks is one of my son's, things that he really loves. He loves London and fireworks and, that kind of thing. So we're like, yes, we have to go. And I ended up getting both my flu jab and my COVID jab, and went to the fireworks that night, like 3 days after book launch. And I just knew, I was like, this is a mistake, but I made the conscious decision to go make that memory with my son, because I said, and it's being real. Who knows what situation I'm going to be in next year? Maybe I won't be well enough to go. Who knows? I could be going through treatment at the time, or anything could be happening. So let's go make this memory now and enjoy it. So we did. And then I was completely, on my back, flat out for like 2 weeks nearly. I really struggled, afterwards, physically, emotionally. And it was when you're neurodivergent, it's not always the negative things that affect us. It's the good things as well that can affect us, and it's that overwhelm. And I think especially because a lot of us are very empathic, we take on a lot of, so it wasn't just the emotions that I was carrying of myself, but there was so many emotions around all of the wonderful women that were in the book, because they were overcoming so much. And it was just like, like, ah,
Yeah.
it's all I can really say. And it was an incredible, and it was an incredible feeling, but at the same time, it just was like, right, I need to kind of back off and recover. And I'm only kind of just now on the 30th of November, like kind of this week, getting back into the swing of things and going, right, I need to kind of organize things a bit better, change up the systems a bit better. So when we're working with the authors, it's a better process for me, not just them, but for me also, and more manageable, because I can't go through this every 6 months, the way that it worked. So it was just creating a bit more systems and processes. And now that I can see what would suit them better, as well, and that we've kind of gone through that. So that's what I'm in the stage right now, putting together, is all of that, working to, for the next book then that will come out in April.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And I'm going to make sure that everybody has all of your links so that they can follow you and know exactly when to expect those launches that will be coming out in the future. And what I really admire about you, Jennifer, is that you're just very authentic as well. So even if, for example, you might share something on social media whereby you're just saying, I need to rest. Like, I'm just resting. It's like you've acknowledged that your body needs rest now, and you're going to take that moment. It might not always be at the most convenient time.
Yeah. Yes, usually isn't.
No, but you listen to it and you don't push it, because you know that probably the recovery time is going to be much longer if you continue.
Well, that's how we burn ourselves out too, isn't it? Because we don't listen. And again, I think when we don't acknowledge the hurdles that we have, whatever they may be, and we just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. Don't get me wrong, it's great to have that grit to continue, but there's a difference between having grit and just ignoring kind of what's going on with you.
Yeah. It's that holistic approach, isn't it? Mind, body, body, mind. It's just having it flow, as easily as possible with those. Acknowledge the hurdles, but I like the way that you've got things in your toolkit, and you're like, okay, so what else could be true? And this is what I sometimes say to my clients if they're going through a spell of negative thinking, or not feeling so good. And I say, well, what else could be true? What's the more effective way of thinking about this? And sometimes it just gives it that perspective, and you think, okay, this is probably a better way of thinking about it. So you mentioned earlier about some of the anxiety that you would get around your husband leaving to go out, have a good time, and then like hours before just getting quite erratic about it. So I would love to explore, if it's okay with you, a bit more about the relationship that you have, and just like and in the past as well, what have been some of your key learnings and experiences from your current and past relationships at all?
I have to be honest and say that pretty much, not every single, but especially, after sort of school, that pretty much every relationship I had was toxic, before my husband. So they were emotionally and or physically abusive, like all of them. I had someone, even two stalkers that after I tried to end things with them. And I think for me, it was there would always be a breakdown too, because I was never really myself. I kind of always, again, because of the masking, would kind of morph, and I would listen to the music that they liked and went to the clubs that they liked, and dressed how they wanted, just so I fit in with all of that, and tried to behave right how they kind of like what their vision of a woman should behave like, which wasn't always good. And then after maybe it could have been 6 months or so, or a year, that the cracks would start to show, and I couldn't keep up, that constant, because it's one thing going out with people and, you're doing a bit of masking when you're out or at an event or something, and yet, you're exhausted and whatever when you come back. But when you're living and breathing that every single day, not only does it take a toll on you physically, but mentally as well. So there would always come a point to where I would just go, oh, I can't do this anymore. And again, it was subconscious, but the mask would kind of come off. And sometimes problems before them would have started. Again, it seemed to always attract a certain type that was quite toxic. And I think, again, a lot of that came from the point of view that subconsciously I just was so unhappy with myself, and my mental health wasn't very good. And I just thought, well, this is, they want me, so let's, that's it. This is what I'm good enough for, I think, is kind of, the mentality that I had a lot. And it was only really, ironically, and when I met my husband, you know, and he's just a very genuine, you know, just what you would almost call like your average Joe kind of, you know, just you know, he wasn't like one of the, you know, the I just dated so many different types of people. You know, he wasn't a rocker, he wasn't a punk rocker, he wasn't a hip hop, you know, it was all, it was just Sean, and you know, just wore jeans and t-shirts, and you know, I was a chef at we worked at an Irish pub over in America, and we met actually at a wedding, an Irish wedding that was being held at another pub. At the time, I ran a magazine and they did a lot of advertising and stuff with us. And I actually picked him up at the bar.
Right.
I said, I told my friend, oh, he is handsome. Go send him. And at the time, I drank Guinness and I drank Jameson whiskey.
Okay.
I said, go send him, and I didn't know who he was. Send him a solid Jameson for me. And we've been together ever since. And we've now been married 21 years. So
Wow.
this October.
Story.
Yeah.
So I am really interested because you went from attracting these toxic relationships and finding that there was a pattern. What was it that was different? Did you say his name was John?
Sean.
Sean. So what was different about Sean, do you find, that really attracted you to him in that moment?
I don't know. There was just this energy. I just said, I don't know. And it was just strange. And it was like one of these things you see on TV, because we were very, you know, we only knew each other for a few months then as well. And him and a lot of his friends were going to go to Wildwood, New Jersey, which at the time, a lot of Irish people went there, you know, to go and work and things for the summer. So I said, well, sure, I'll go with you. And I put all my stuff in storage. Again, like this was the ADHD coming through.
Yeah.
It's like, sure, why not? So put all my stuff in storage. We went and he met my mother for, you know, a few weeks. And then we went on to New Jersey and we were there. And then from there, the plan was to come over to Ireland for 6 months on my 6 months visa and then go back to the States. Now, unbeknownst to me, he had well overstayed his visa by a year. Well over a year. So by the time we went to go back over, he actually got stopped in immigration. Now, I didn't know this at the time. So it was like, again, like a movie. I'm in an airport on my own. Everyone else had boarded the plane. All the immigration officers had left and he's not there. And I'm going, he's left me stranded in this airport. So I said, he's not. I said, no. I'm going to, he's think no chance. So I just went to go find him. And he had been pulled into the immigration office. So they weren't going to let him fly. So long story short, anyway, I came off the plane, had to go back over, apply for my fiance visa, was in the States for 3 months, came back over, and then we were married. So we really only knew each other for about a year and a half when we got married. But we just, I don't know, we just kind of knew, and there wasn't like this whole sweeping, you know, drama where he was on his knee going, please don't leave me. It was just like, yeah, we just want to hang together. And I think for us, the biggest thing was that we were instantly like best friends, you know, and we still are. And I think we have that friendship that, you know, obviously it was romantic as well, but underneath that, we have that even now, such a strong friendship. And even when things are really bad, we can make each other laugh, you know, when we're going through a lot. And I think that's one of the strongest things that has kept us together, really, you know, because we work together as well, like in the consultancy, and a lot of people can't do that. You know, we've worked together side by side, spending all day together for, you know, over 20, you know, for near 20 years as well. So in one shape or form or the other. And, you know, even that you have to have, you know, a certain mentality. And it doesn't mean we don't fight and argue. It doesn't mean, you know, we don't say or do things that, you know, annoy each other, but we don't carry that around. We'll go, hey, you know, that was a bit crap. You know, we speak very bluntly with each other.
Okay.
But then we move on, you know, we don't drag it with us that way, I think, you know, and it works for us.
Yeah. One of the key components that I do witness, and I also do, you know, encourage my coaching clients, is that whole friendship and having that as being one of the foundations to having a healthy relationship. The laughter, the playfulness, the excitement, because we can become complacent in our relationships, and become a bit stale as we go on and on, particularly if maybe you're working, you know, with a partner as well. So you have that whole professionalism and getting things done, but also the separation between that's work. This is us, you know, on the romantic side too. And what you said there about communication, it sounds to me that you have communication with him that is open, transparent,
Mm-hmm.
but you also understand each
Yes.
other
Yeah.
really well in the
Yeah.
way. Have you, so now, given the diagnoses that you have had, is there a certain way that you like to be communicated with?
Yeah, I just, and we laugh because Sean says to me all the time. For instance, we had people come to the door one time who were selling paintings.
Yeah.
I was like, sure, I'll buy one. Oh, your grandmother's sick? Of course. I'm that type of, I nearly
Mm.
bought a 3,000, pound Kirby Hoover when the sales ended. She was giving me the big spiel. So I'm very, I'm very, I take you as you say you are. And I believe, I've had to learn to kind of not be quite so much that way, although at the core, that's just who I am.
Yeah.
And that's how so that's what I appreciate is just honest, put it on a plate communication, don't try and dress it up or sweeten it up.
Yeah.
If something's wrong, you just need to say, don't let me try and guess. If there's a problem, tell me what it is. If I've done something to annoy you, I might not be aware of it. If you
Yeah.
let me know, we can address it. And likewise, if you if we get along and or whatever, if you like my work or you like something that I have done or said, then hey, yay, then you can let me know that as well. And then I know, well, this is how they like to communicate, or this is the things that they like to talk about. So I think for a lot of us, now not all of us, but for a lot of us who are neurodivergent, we need that clear communication, because we don't read, a lot of us, like I'm a bit rubbish at reading social cues and things like that. So it's hard for me to kind of read between the lines too much.
Yeah. When I asked you what attracted you to Sean, and you spoke about how you met and everything like that, and I was thinking, sometimes we attract people, not sometimes, but oftentimes, we are attracting people depending on our own energy.
Yes.
So, given what you had experienced with the previous toxic relationships, did you do some inner work in order to change up your energy that could have led to that union with yourself and Sean? What were you doing to heal?
I don't even think it was necessarily inner work. I think it was more because I was probably a bit unaware of some of the things were going on. Now, the relationship before him was very toxic, like that he was one of the ones that he was very much stalking me, at the end. And it was, I had moved in with a friend of mine that I was running the magazine with. So I think I was just in that position where it was one of the first times that, besides when I was like when I first graduated, that there wasn't necessarily a man in the house.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was just, me and my girlfriends, and we were hanging out, and I found that very, that very liberating, excuse me.
Yeah.
That very liberating. And it gave me that bit of energy. The magazine was going really well. We were having lots of fun with it, and so I think it was just my energy as a whole. I was relieved to be out of the previous relationship, even though there was still, some issues with him following me around and things of this nature. But besides that, I was very glad to be free of the relationship. I just felt like there was probably a huge weight, in that regard, with him, off around my neck, really, because it was a lot to sort of carry around. And yeah, I don't know. It was just different. I could just tell that he was different. Just the way he was with me was different. There wasn't any pressure to be a certain way. It was just kind of, let's just hang, there wasn't any, you have to listen to this kind of music. You have to do this. You have to dress this way. You have to, it was just, and especially like when we were, in Wildwood, because we were all working like 2 or 3 jobs, everyone was there for the money, just to make as much money that summer as possible. So all of us were a mess,
Yeah.
It was just, there was no there was no anything. So it was like, right, if he can, if he still likes me through this, then
Yeah.
he's gonna like me through anything.
Yeah. It sounds to me as in, because you had that opportunity to have that break where there was no man in your
Yeah.
life, it wasn't intentional to do inner work, but naturally you were nurturing a different way of being.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
had the calmness,
Yeah.
you're having fun, you had a sisterhood around your girls.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were in that energy, you were able to attract, somebody who accepted you and
Yes.
embraced you for all of who you are, with no
Yeah.
mask,
Yes.
no
Yeah.
weird stalker tendencies. And just for my understanding as well, and for the audience, now how did you break that stalker situation? Did some legal enforcement come in, or
It
you
ended up just kind of, I was really leaving the country.
ah
Yeah, because even when I went to Ohio to go get my fiance visa, I had noticed, and at the time when I had met him, he was living in Florida, and he had followed me. He had followed me up a couple of times I had seen him. So, and that was scary because obviously I was
yeah
on my own there with my mom. But his whole intention, I think, was to not to get back with me, but just to let me know, hey, I can find you anywhere, kind of thing. And then I was like, no, you can't. But it's ironic and it was funny because literally just this summer, it doesn't happen very often now. But he had a shaved head, and there's lots of people in Ireland who have a shaved head, but he had a shaved head and like a goatee and this kind of thing. And sometimes I just, I'll catch somebody out of the corner of my eye and my heart pauses and I go,
mm,
is that is that is that him? And I've even had to say to Sean a couple of times, oh, and he was like, he's not over here, like
mm,
he grounds me and brings me back and he's like, he's not over here. He doesn't know me. He's never, where you wouldn't even know where to look for you. just
yeah
relax about it. So and even with being visible online, it's funny because you do think of all of these things. Sorry, excuse me. That, whether it was him or whether it was other, guys dated in my past or whatever it was, and you kind of go, are these people gonna, start creeping on me on social media now? Are they going to start leaving, all of this kind of stuff? And there was one fella who I was friends with, for a while. But he just kind of got a bit strange and I had to just kind of, block him and say, yeah, no, don't, it's not appropriate. Don't contact me. So that's it, and it is, I think for any woman who's been through that situation, it's one of those things that doesn't ever really leave you either. You are, like I said, no matter what, and it's subconscious. And even though I know that I'm safe and all of this, there are those times. It doesn't happen for very often, maybe once or twice a year or something still to this day. And it's been what, over 20 years, still catches my eye and I go, and it takes my breath for a second.
and it's important that we take the opportunity to protect our safety as well. So I know that there's various different organizations, if it needs to be reported to the police, that there's various different things that can be done if there's a genuine concern. Like you said, on social media, there can be cyber stalking that takes place, and it's the ability to be able to block that person, and just really preserve our safety, because it's absolutely imperative that we do that as well. So you've had some really toxic experiences in relationships, and now you're in a relationship with Sean. What would you say your personal definition of love is? What does that mean to you, the word in romantic context?
I think I would even just say like best friends who kiss.
Ooh,
I think to me, yeah,
wow, that's like a slogan.
Yeah, isn't it? I have to trademark that. I'll let you borrow it.
You should trademark that. That's another one of your movements and initiatives. Yes. Wow, I absolutely. So does that provoke a feeling when you say that? Does that provoke a feeling for you?
It does for me, yeah. Because I'm also not like an overly, I mean, don't get me wrong, I am affectionate, but I'm not like an overly, let's walk down the street and hold hands constantly kind of person. So for me to extend that affection, it means a lot, kind of thing. So yeah, it does. It just makes me go, yeah. And I think, like you said, it's having that bedrock, of that friendship that I think is because let's be honest, we get old, we change, our looks change, life takes its toll on us at times. We're not always going to be and look, exactly as what we did. But I think if we have that, that bedrock of just being really good friends and honest friends, and we can have a laugh with each other, that's the most kind of important thing, really.
Oh, I love your personal definition of love, and I cannot get that tagline out of my head now.
You can have
Do trademark it before. Before you see me all over social media, hey, that is all on camera. You know that oh, that has been absolutely magnificent. Jennifer, this is going to bring this wonderful conversation to an end. I thank you so much for all that you have shared with us.
Well, thank you, Teresha. It's been lovely to be here.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. I would be absolutely amazing if you could leave our listeners with one key takeaway to help them on their journey of love, life, and relationships.
I think it would be, and it's going to sound maybe very generic, maybe perhaps, but you genuinely need to be yourself when you're in a relationship, trying to change yourself to suit someone else. And I'm not saying, oh, I have, I'm not saying have bad behavior towards people and give it that excuse, but you need to be your genuine self. And if they don't accept you and they don't love you, or they insist that you change this way or that way to kind of mold you into something that they want, that they're not the right person for you.
Yeah. I love that message. I do. And just before we close the conversation, I just want to focus a little bit on the word rebel, because obviously you use the word rebel with a
lot.
Yeah, exactly. So just for clarity, because sometimes when you think about the word rebel as well, you think of somebody who just has no regard for. But I like the angle you've taken on it. What was it with that word that made you really want to focus on that?
Well, I think in one fashion or another, I've always been a rebel my whole life. For me, it's not necessarily been about breaking rules per se, but when I see things that don't sit right with me, when I've seen, like, I would stick up for people. I'm very, I'm a big animal advocate, just all, whether it's, whatever it might be. Ironically, I didn't point a lot of that towards myself, unfortunately, but I've always had that, that general sort of attitude. And just challenge things. I said, well, why do we have to accept this? Why is this society this way? Why does this happen this way? So I think that I've always had that kind of rebel thread kind of running through me. And then with the business, it's very much, I always like to say it's not necessarily about destruction, or whatnot, but it's about, deciding to change, deciding to do things a different way. So you can be a rebel leader in your own business, and how you can do that is by building a business that suits you and not using the cookie cutters that everyone else has out there. How you can be a rebel maybe in your relationships is, again, being true to yourself. And I'm not saying be narcissistic or, or anything like that, but be true to your own genuine self. And be the kind of friend, the kind of partner that you would want others, to be as well. So for me, I think that's where the rebel aspect comes in. It's just very much not necessarily having to adhere to all of the biases and the restrictions and the limiting beliefs that society has for us.
Oh, thank you for explaining that so magically. It just gives everybody some clarity. And one thing that was coming to me when you said that is, rather than destruction, construction. Build something.
Yes, exactly.
That's, absolutely beneficial to all.
Yes,
Jennifer,
exactly.
how can our listeners get in contact with you should they want to reach out to you? Have you got any social events coming up at all that they could be made aware of?
Now, we don't have a date set yet, but we are doing a 5-day rebellion summit.
Rebellion,
yes, in the new year, where we're going to have some great speakers and things of that nature. So that'll be really cool, and it's going to be free as well. So that's coming up in January. I'll have to. We haven't set the exact date, but probably towards the end of the month. And then, like I said, we'll have the children's book just launched. Adeline Plays Many Ways. And then we have our next Rebel with a Cause book is coming out in April, and you can find us on pretty much anywhere. If you put in Lady Rebel Clubs, you'll see our socials pop up.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I'm going to drop all of Jennifer's links into the show notes as well, so you'll be able to easily access that too. Once again, Jennifer, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
It's been absolutely lovely. Thank you. And for everybody, I want to thank you for your time, for your attention, and also for your energy in listening to this show today. And until the next episode, take great care of yourself and others too.